Welcome to the Harshi podcast with myself, January Harshi.
And Brandon Harshi.
Thank you for joining us. I actually have lost count on which number we're on.
This is number 15.
This is our 15th episode.
Finally. You got back from Canada.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yesterday, I was coming back from Calgary, Alberta, and I was supposed to have a flight from Calgary to Salt Lake City and then Salt Lake City to Austin, Texas. But I had a short layover, which was fine. However, my very early morning flight yesterday was not fine. It had multiple 15-minute delays until I only had maybe 10 or 15 minutes till my connecting flight took off. And even with running, I didn't make it. So after cursing myself for even running and bothering.
Running's stupid.
Right? Stupid and rude. I went up to a desk and just said, I just missed my flight. Can you rebook me? And within 30 seconds, I was rebooked. But that means I had 2 more flights. So yesterday, I went from Calgary to Salt Lake City, Utah, to Atlanta, Georgia, and finally landed in Austin, Texas. But you know what? It was not a bad day because it was up to me how I chose to handle it. And I think my meditation lately has been helping, and we should do podcasts on that soon.
Absolutely.
Episode. And I just took care of myself, and I took it slow and easy, and I drank a lot of coffee. I ate some good food. I had some good juices. And when I was really, really tired, I put on good music and just jammed out. I'm pretty sure many people were staring at me, and I'm pretty sure I don't care.
I'm pretty sure you're about the only one I've ever met that would think a 15-hour travel day was a good day.
Yeah. You know, it's all because of the place I'm in right now, and I'm grateful for it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, which we're actually going to talk about today, our mental attitude, our mental well-being, and our mental health.
Absolutely.
And while there's probably 100 podcast episode and variations of that available to do, and who knows, maybe we will.
Yeah.
Today we're going to focus on your journey with mental health.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And you recently shared a post on Instagram opening up about what your journey has been like recently, and what made you decide to open up about it?
Well, I just think it needs to be talked about more. I felt like my story and opening up could maybe help 1 or 2 other people, and that has turned out to be one of my biggest posts ever on Instagram, and one of my most commented posts ever, and it really blew my mind as to how many people are actually struggling with mental health. It was actually a very eye-opening day for me when I did that, and because of that, I definitely wanted to expand upon that on the podcast and maybe help even more people with.
I would say it was also one of your most meaningful posts.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it and you're wondering what we're talking about, I opened up about how I have bipolar 2 disorder, and I've had it pretty much my entire life. When I think about all the different characteristics of having bipolar disorder, that's definitely the case. And my dad actually had bipolar disorder. He wasn't diagnosed until he was 48. So he went.
Wow.
He actually went 2/3 of his life undiagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it definitely made for difficulties in his and my mom's marriage, and definitely as from a child's perspective, seeing your parents always arguing and fighting about stuff.
Well, and thinking about it now, they just didn't even have all the information available to them about what was really going on.
No,
until it was too late.
Right, they didn't. And I think back then it was pretty much all diagnosed as bipolar disorder, whereas there's a couple different diagnoses that fall under that now. And like I said, bipolar 2 disorder is what I have, and actually what I think my dad had as well.
So what is, real quick, just in layman terms, the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 disorder?
Well, general bipolar disorder, the one that people are most know the most about is when you have the real high mania episodes where you feel euphoric, maybe make rash decisions. Not.
But also very creative and happy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
full of life.
yeah. There's a lot of happiness there. Like I said, that euphoric feeling. Sounds great to me actually. But then you fluctuate with very depressive lows, and
Right.
maybe even lower than depression. It gets pretty bad, and you cycle back and forth through that a number of times throughout the year. If it gets real bad throughout the month, weeks, it can get pretty difficult. With bipolar 2 disorder, you tend to be more on the depressed side, and instead of feeling the mania, you feel more hypomania, which is a lower level of mania. And so it's not quite the euphoria, but you definitely feel like,
Just feel good.
yeah, you feel like you can take on the world and do a million things, and it's a good feeling when you have those days, because the other days are not so good.
I have good days like that too when I'm ovulating. But I don't think it's the same thing.
I do enjoy when you're ovulating.
I just feel on and sharp and like, yeah, I'm going to get everything done. And, then I get on other things.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, did I make you a little
You
speechless?
you do get on other things.
Oh, okay. So let's reel this in. So bipolar 2 actually has another diagnosis name as well. What is it?
Well, it used to be called cyclothymia,
Okay.
or cyclothymic disorder, I believe. And I think now that's kind of looked at as a precursor to being bipolar 2.
Okay.
And I think what differentiates it is that you go through 4 cycles in a year. And by cycle, meaning a manic episode to a depressed episode, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
If you do more than 4 a year, then you're looking at what's called rapid cycling.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it really often, you're talking about ultra rapid cycling, and that can get pretty bad.
Intense. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I will admit that before our journey with this year, you mentioned it to me when we were 19 and started dating. You mentioned that you had been. So share about that. Share about when you were first diagnosed being bipolar.
Right. Well, I went to a psychiatrist when I was 18. I had always kind of been angry and had some depression, and kind of fluctuated between both. And I would always have racing thoughts and just all general traits of having bipolar disorder. And based on what I knew from my dad and what he was diagnosed with, I kind of had an idea that maybe I was. So I went to this psychiatrist, and it feels like it was only 10 minutes. Maybe it was 15 or 20, whatever it was. It wasn't very long, because he had his clipboard with his sheet on there, and I swear he was just checking off boxes, because he was just asking me one question after another for a short amount of time, and it looked like he was making a check on this clipboard. And after a number of questions, he said, "Yep, definitely sounds like bipolar disorder," and wrote me a script, and here, take these, and we'll see you whenever it is. I can't remember when I went back in to see him a couple weeks later. And he prescribed me Prozac and lithium. And Prozac is an antidepressant. Everyone is probably pretty familiar with that. It's a pretty commonly known drug. And then lithium is kind of the benchmark for mood stabilization drugs, especially with bipolar disorder.
Right.
I have since learned that you do not mix the two, if at all, definitely not in the beginning.
Right. It's something you have to ease into.
Right. And so I wish I remember the doses he gave me, but like I said, this is 20 years ago. But it was enough to knock me out for 13 hours a night, which I'm lucky. If I get 8 hours of sleep, I had a lot of sleep that night. That was a really long night of sleep for me. So I was asleep 13 hours, and then the other 11 hours of the day, I was a zombie. I couldn't even function. I mean, just walking around the apartment was a chore. I felt like each of my legs was 200 pounds, and just standing up straight was really physically challenging. It was ridiculous. And so after 3 weeks of that, I just threw the medication away. I never went back to see that guy, and just thought he was a quack. I mean, absolute quack.
And knowing what we know now, it's really amazing that you didn't suffer when you just went off the medications too.
Yeah,
But they obviously weren't the right meds for you either. So it sounds like he gave you very cookie cutter care, not individualized care.
oh yeah, yeah, it was
Like he diagnosed you based
garbage.
off like a Google checklist.
Yeah, it may have been the checklist he had when he was in
Yeah,
school
because we didn't
20
even
years
have
earlier.
Google like we do now. We're
It was,
aging
yeah, I don't
ourselves,
think
but
there was, Google was much of a presence back in
so after that
97.
experience, I mean, how did you feel about being diagnosed bipolar? Like, what did you think about that?
Well, that was bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I thought the guy was a quack. I thought he was full of it. I didn't think he knew what he was talking about. And because of that, it kind of made me feel like maybe my dad got a bunk diagnosis, that maybe what he was quote unquote going through was bullshit as well. And so I never really had a lot of faith and belief that the medication he was taking was actually helping him and doing what he thought it was doing. I pretty much felt that way the rest of his life, and up until recently with my own journey that
Mm-hmm.
kind of forced me in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So
And that's kind of what I was going to lead into, is that when you are not familiar with it, you only know the few things we all of us listening. If you don't have experience with this yourself or with someone you love, we only know a few things. We don't know much about it. And I will admit, when people comment on my stuff, not anymore, but in the past, yes, I deal with bipolar, or I deal with borderline personality, or I deal with these things. Even I kind of felt like I didn't know how to respond, and taken back, and not really understanding that fully and what that meant, and not judgmental, but just ill-equipped to even hold space for that. And it kind
yeah,
of, not scary, but kind of just a little off-putting. And it wasn't until we got serious this year about it possibly being a true thing that your beautiful brain deals with, that I had to put those judgments or fears or aside, and actually educate myself,
right.
on what it was, and learn that there's bipolar 1, there's bipolar 2, what that means. And this is a good time to bring up that, just like with everything else I always talk about, there's going to be variations of normal. So you're sharing
Absolutely.
your experience, but it is your experience. And why some of
Right.
you that are listening that either deal with anxiety or depression, bipolar, or anything similar, take what solidarity you can from this, but also know that your journey is your journey, and you deserve individualized, unique care, and you have your own variations of normal.
Well, absolutely. And the thing too is, obviously there's a big stigma about mental health.
Oh, yeah,
I don't think it's just in our country, but probably in Western
in general.
society in general. It's probably more exacerbated here in the U.S. But someone has a mental health disorder, you think, oh wow, well, maybe they're a little crazy. Let's keep our
It's kind of
distance. And
scary, right? Like, I don't know about
yeah,
that.
yeah, like, oh, that person's a little scary, a little weird. Let's stay away from them. And then on top of that, every mental health disorder has an even more of a stigma as well. So if someone has anxiety, first thought is like, oh well, they probably get panic attacks.
Or
Some
they're just it's all in their heads.
they're
They're making it up.
paranoid.
They're just
Yeah.
making it all up. Mm-hmm.
Or if they're depressed, oh well, they're probably laying in bed all day. They just
You
need to
know,
get out, walk around.
they should just
and,
go for They should just go for a walk, and
yeah,
read a self-help book.
right. Oh, if they have bipolar disorder, well, they have highs and lows. They're probably a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Schizophrenic. Well, they're insane and this and that. I mean, it's just all these different stereotypes and stigmas that are attached to each disorder, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so much more than
And
that.
it's really just a misunderstanding and a
Yeah.
lack of education.
Yeah, exactly. I
Right.
mean, it's being on the other end of it now. I can't honestly say I feel ashamed of it or worried what people think. I mean, I don't care. I don't care what people think of me
That's
one
a
way or
bigger
another.
blessing than you might even realize, because
Right.
most people do care
Yeah.
what other people think. I think especially women and moms.
Mm-hmm.
And as women, we're just ingrained to feel shame from a really young age. I feel like we have to act a certain way, talk a certain way, to just be told that we're worthy of just existing or being loved. And we have to fight for our rights all the time. And so
Yeah.
especially as a woman and a mother, and you have like a baby or little ones and you're dealing with mental health, I think most of you listening that are especially females, women, or relate to being a woman, feel that you're really scared of being judged and you do have a shame there. So I just want to validate that for anyone who's listening, that does feel scared or feels a shame connected to it or worry about judgment, what people will think of you as a person or a mother or a parent, that's a normal feeling. And I wish I could say don't feel that way or that you don't have to feel that way, but that's also probably just a survival instinct kicking in too, that you want to protect yourself and your space and your kids and whatnot. So I just want to validate that for you. But I also think it's great for you, Brandon, that you really don't care what people think. You never have.
Yeah.
And that allows you to start opening up and talking about this because it does need to be talked about more.
Well, you do make a good point, though, how, from a woman's point of view, there's the shame, the guilt, worrying what other people are going to think of them. From a guy's standpoint, guys, we don't talk about our feelings. That's not manly. We don't want to talk about maybe we're having a hard time. Just let's suck it up and get through it. And, the thought is that if you do open up that, you're being a little bitch about it. And who wants to do that? You want to be a man, right?
Yeah, that's funny, not funny. I mean,
well, yeah, but that's how I was raised. It's like
true.
You just suck it up and you be a man about it. And, I'm into, as many manly things as the next guy, but I'm also not afraid of saying, hey, sometimes I go through some shit and some other people may be going through similar things and maybe it'll help them.
But you bring up a really good point. So why I said how a lot of like women feel for men is just more like you just don't talk about it.
No, yeah, it's like taboo for a man to talk about
even
it.
If you don't care, and maybe some of you men listening do care what other people think, but even if you don't care what other people think, you just don't talk about it.
Right. You just and there have been times, obviously in my life where something happens, like, well, I just ignore it, put your head down, and go to work and move on, and
plug it up and move along.
Plug it up and move along.
We'll have to tell that story sometime.
Oh my gosh.
Oh goodness. But yeah that's a little inside joke right there. But yeah, so I think it's interesting how when we say it out loud that, as a man, you feel like, oh, you just don't talk about it. And a woman, you feel shame just for dealing with something that is a variation normal that so many other people deal with. When we say it out loud, it feels like, well, that's just silly. Mm-hmm. But it's so ingrained in all of us from a young age. And a side note, I think that our generation is working really hard to change that.
Yeah,
I really
agree.
think our generation is working to heal a few generations behind us and working to set up a better world for the generations coming, ahead of us, after us.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah,
after us, hopefully. So.
Yeah, we have a little work to do. The previous few generations made things a little rough on us.
Made things rough on themselves.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too.
Made things rough on themselves, and there is a generational gap there. And, I don't feel it's any surprise I do what I do. And now that you're doing this, which is a lot of people say that you're brave. How do you feel about that?
I think that's great if they feel that way. I don't feel brave or scared or either way. I guess I feel comfortable with how I'm feeling about things and where I'm at. I feel like even though I have bipolar 2 disorder, that I'm very functional and very determined and very focused on not being held back by that and actually being able to overcome it to a large extent. Well, it doesn't have to
be a hopeless thing, right? Like you can still do so many things. What we were talking about today, sleep, what you put into your body with diet, exercise, and
meditation or mindfulness. Yeah.
And then, of course, medication too, if needed, or whatnot. So let me get into that for a second with you.
Yeah.
What made you finally not only go back to thinking that diagnosis might have been accurate or one similar, because really it wasn't bipolar 1, it's bipolar 2 for you. What made you go back to feeling that was a possibility and then reaching out to somebody, a psychiatrist, right? To figure out if that's what was going on and to get help? Like what finally got you back there?
Well, let me go back just a little bit to actually answer that question. So pretty much my whole life, I feel like I've had this base level of, I call it melancholy. So let's say you're neutral, you're not happy or sad. I was always on a somewhat depressed kind of state. Like I always kind of had a glass half empty kind of feel. If something could go wrong, it might. Just kind of look at everything in a negative light. And I would have my moments where like, oh, everything's fantastic, but there would be more moments where things felt really bad and a lot up and down. And when me personally, when I feel that down and that depression, I react with anger. And so I have had a lot of really bad anger since I was a little kid, and it gets hard. It gets hard to be that way, and that's kind of how things have been for me most of my life. And so the last few years, we had a bunch of crazy stuff happening. My dad passed away.
And you and your dad were close.
My dad and I were really close. He passed away. And then we had baby number 6, which...
No big deal.
It's a huge life change. And you think about...
It's a big deal.
Yeah. You think about it's a huge life change, another addition to the family. There's a lot of sleeplessness that comes with it, a lot of postpartum, blues or depression that follow for, the women and the men. Definitely.
Absolutely.
I've had 2 different bad bouts of postpartum depression, and one of them was after baby number 6. Absolutely. And so there's that. Then we had to move a month and a half after baby number 6 was moved. Unexpectedly. We thought we were going to continue renting this house and eventually buy it. Didn't work out. And so we had to move.
We might still not be over it, y'all.
Yeah, it was a pretty awesome house. And we moved, and we just happened to move into a house where the landlord was essentially a crook. And we had to move 10 months later.
Oh, so you went there.
I did. The guy was an absolute crook. He was a good Christian man, quote unquote.
He did air quote, you guys.
But he was total crook.
He was, and he was a bully. Him and I had some words because he wanted Brandon to keep his wife in line. And if you guys know me,
well, and if you know me, like don't tell me that shit. I'm gonna hand you your ass.
Okay, we could seriously go on about this for a long time. So
I'm triggered.
Hashtag triggered. So true. Oh, anyway, so we had to move 10 months later again.
Yeah, and in a single year, in less than 12 months, moving is expensive. And not only that, that crooked landlord kept our entire deposits. I mean, I don't know about other states, but in Texas, the housing tenant laws heavily favor the landlord. Right. So they had every justification.
And I understand why, but in this situation, it was very frustrating. And
yeah,
and so we had to move 10 months apart. We had our baby, which was a planned home birth, but I had backup care with OB, so we had a hospital birth and cesarean that we had to pay out of pocket. and then we moved the second time, and we were right in the throes of events again.
Yeah,
with both moves.
But with that second move, it was one thing too many, and I became paralyzed emotionally and mentally. I was absolutely depressed, and to be perfectly honest, I felt suicidal at times. And I know that's tough for you to hear, and I understand that. It was weird to be in that position, because I've always had a pretty strong sense of self-preservation, and to actually be at that point where it's like, the hell with this, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, was pretty tough. That was all in the middle of events.
And when he says he was paralyzed about it, it was we were holding on, like we lost a parent and had another baby and had to move unexpectedly, and that was a lot, you guys. And we were having a really hard time recovering from those 3 things. And so then when all of a sudden we had to move our family of 8 again, I remember telling you that, look, like I'm about to have to do like 6 events in the next 4 weeks. It was something ridiculous.
It was 7 weekends in a row you had to travel. Because
we had planned it to go on the road for part of it together, not knowing this was going to come up. Like, that's the thing about plans. Every time we make plans, like, you don't know what life is going to throw at you in the meantime. But I remember telling you, like, I really need you to take the lead with packing, because, I'm going to be on the road a lot now by myself. And you were like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then as we started doing the things we needed to move out of this house, we had to professionally clean, all this kind of stuff. And the landlord started harassing us horribly. And it was very unprofessional and very out of line. And when Brandon says he just became paralyzed, like he literally shut down. I don't think you packed one box. I think that I just ended up I had to go into survival mode and just pack us and get everything done. And I know it's not, you know, I don't, I know you feel bad about that, but it just is what it was. And I had never really, I don't think I really realized up to that point that you had any type of suicidal thoughts because, well, I mean, we've been together 19 years
Mm-hmm.
and this is never something that's been part of our vocabulary, our discussions,
No.
anything. And I never thought it would be. Like, never, like, you think that'll never be you guys, right? Like, parents who have a child who ends their life, or if you have like a brother or a sister or a parent, many of you listening to this might be affected by somebody who has taken their life. And I just want to say, I'm really sorry. And I know it's hard to talk about, but if we don't talk about it, we're going to keep losing people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not even know that it could have been an issue, or that maybe we could have just held space for them or, help, just given them just love so they could get the help they deserve. So we have to talk about this, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so when Brandon expressed this to me, I was really shocked. And we did get through that, barely. We did get through that. And luckily you didn't attempt anything, but it was all of a sudden a more available and common thought to you, I think.
Yeah, it was around that time we were moving, and then right afterwards, it was a pretty low point for me. Had a pretty low point with it in San Diego the night before, or San Diego Birth Without Fear
So
meetup.
we moved into this apartment when?
March of last year, of 2016.
And then when did we go to San Diego?
Later that month.
Later that month.
Yeah.
So that was the second time you mentioned something to me about it. And what was interesting, you guys, is that on paper everything was good, right? Like we had this beautiful event.
Yes.
And we had this amazing hotel room space that we were upgraded to, and the kids just loved this trip. They remember it with good memories. But you were just so overwhelmed with everything life had thrown our way.
Yeah.
And it was too much. It was too much too quick.
Mm-hmm.
And you were very overwhelmed and very depressed. And I was dealing with my own postpartum anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And you just started feeling, I remember you telling me, you started feeling like, if it's always going to be like this, I just don't want to even be here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty rough. So that night before the San Diego meetup that we did, which was actually March 26th of last year. It was Easter weekend. It was a Saturday between Good Friday and Easter.
Yeah, it was Easter weekend.
And so that night before, we needed some things from Target. And so I went over to the Target there in San Diego, and it was a madhouse. And I was there. I was already exhausted from driving, and it was just...
Exhausted is an understatement for how exhausted we were.
It was beyond exhausting. And so I was in this stupid Target forever, it felt like. And then the line to check out for 20 minutes because they had 60 people checking out and 2 cashiers. It was insane. So I got back and I was really frustrated because I felt like our event planner should have been the one to go and get all those supplies, and then I could have hung out with you.
Which was probably my fault, but yes.
It is what it is at this point, but really got frustrating, and we ended up getting into a bit of an argument, and you went back to the room and I went out to our Suburban and just sat there, and I had the thought of driving into head-on traffic right there on the I-5 that was just a little ways past the frontage road in front of the parking lot. I put my hand on the gear shift, and I was going to do it, and I knew that if I put it in reverse, I wasn't going to stop. And for some reason, I just didn't. And Maybe
you
that.
told me what that reason was.
Well, yeah, the kids. I think it was subconsciously. At the time, I didn't understand like what the reason was, but I just didn't. And I got out of the car, went back to the hotel room, and slept like crap that night. And then we did the meetup all day, and I actually wore Beard Baby later in the day, and we were on stage talking about your birth stories together at at the end of the meetup. And after it was over and went back to our room, I had such an emotional hangover from that day and from the night before and what I had thought and almost planned on doing that I literally just dropped on this bed and passed out.
You did.
And you were embarrassed because you had to pay the nanny that was watching her kids, and I understand why, but I literally just passed out. I couldn't stay awake.
Well, at this point, we still didn't have all the information available to us as well about what was really going on. We were just trying to get through our lives day by day, and we were in survival mode. I think you bring up a good point, though, that at the time, no one would have known that you were feeling that way. No one would have known that you were thinking that maybe you should just end your life.
No one knew.
And
not
is
even
that
you.
not the story we hear so often?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know it.
No, you always hear like, oh, well, they seem so happy. I never heard anything from them. No, because it's humiliating to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to live anymore.
Yeah,
it feels horrible to say out loud. It's the stupidest thing. And to be perfectly honest, I had an instance where I got to that point. It was earlier this year, and I called the suicide prevention hotline. I literally did. And you know what? It helps. So if you're struggling and you come to a point where you feel like, hey, you know what? I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't want to go on living. Call that number. Call the suicide prevention hotline, because you know what? They help, and the person talking to you is understanding and caring, and it finally feels like someone is listening to you and is willing to validate you and support you. And you don't know who they are. They don't know who you are. It's completely anonymous, both ways. But it helps, and they give you suggestions, and they really help you to kind of refocus and ground yourself and say, hey, okay, I'm being irrational. I need to, think this through. I need to get some help seriously. And I just couldn't recommend it even more. And so before that...
Can I just share the number?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's 1-800-273-8255. So 1-800-273-8255. The reason I know that is because Logic did a song.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember sharing it with you. And I think that it was probably subconsciously in the back of your mind, because I remember sharing that song and that number with you.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you had never, I don't think you'd ever really thought about it or considered it before. And I will be honest with you guys listening. It brings me to tears. I've been brought to tears many times already in this podcast, that my husband had to call this number, but I'm so grateful that it's there and that you did, that, because it hit, especially with being bipolar and bipolar 2, but it hits you so fast. And
it does.
I that day that you called went from having what should have been just a fine, good day to just all of a sudden, like it was the end of the world.
Yeah, it was. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. After going back to...
This is why he says he gets to use the word crazy.
Yes, that's true.
It's his favorite word. And he's like, he says, I'm crazy and I'm not offended, so I get to use the word.
Exactly. So if you're offended by me saying crazy, I don't care. So sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. All right, you wanted to go back.
Perfect synchronization there. The Russian judge gives us a 10. Yes.
Oh my gosh. I can't. All right, you said you wanted to go back to say
Yeah. So after that whole incident with the San Diego meetup that weekend, things started to slowly simmer down a little bit. I felt like that summer last year was kind of calming down a little bit. And then last September, I had a really huge falling out with my brother. And he and I have always had a rocky relationship since I've been an adult. And we actually didn't speak for a number of years. And then once my dad was going through cancer and looking like he wasn't going to make it, we patched things up and we had a fantastic relationship for 4 years. And just thought, hey, we moved past all this. And we just had another round of things happen that was unexpected, especially on my end. And he took it too far and just made it clear that it didn't want to be a part of our lives. And it made me snap. It was the final straw that broke the camel's back. And after that, I went into ultra, mega, super, ultra rapid cycling. And meaning I was manic one day, super depressed for 5 days, manic for 2 days, depressed for 4. I mean, I was cycling on a weekly basis, which is very bad. And honestly, some days I'd cycle in just the same day.
It was exhausting.
I was
for everyone.
Yes, I literally went insane for a long time. And the straw that broke the camel's, and before I go on, I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't figure out why I was doing this.
It was very confusing.
It was crazy because I didn't want to be that way, but I felt like I had no control over it. To be perfectly honest, the first half of this entire year, because of this, I just would think to myself, not necessarily suicidal thoughts, but just like thoughts of death. Like, what would it be like if I was dead? I wouldn't even be feeling this pain, because it was just literal pain that I couldn't deal with in my mind. It was staggering.
And when it's mental pain and not physical pain, it's hard for anyone to understand.
Yeah, and so if any of you go back to my Instagram page and look up that post, it's a quote by Carrie Fisher, who was Princess Leia. She had bipolar disorder.
And she was very open about it.
Very open about it. And I have a couple other images that I attached afterwards, and there's the picture of the lady kind of hanging her head in her hands and all these colors just dripping out of her. That's how it feels like. It's just all these racing thoughts, and you can't stop them. You can't help but feeling depressed and crippled emotionally. And I was just feeling like if I used to want to live a long life, but if I'm going to feel like this my whole life, I don't even know if I'm going to make another 10 years or 5 or who knows what. And the straw that broke the camel's back finally that pushed me to seeking help is you and I had a bad argument, and you told me you hated me. And so after that, I just said, you know what? This is not okay. I cannot have my life like this. I can't personally control it right now. I don't know what's going on or what to do. So I need to find someone to help me with this. And I did some research one morning for a couple hours, and I was like, well, what the hell? Let me look up bipolar disorder and see if maybe that really is. And almost to a T, I think there were 14 different traits, and I had 13 of them.
So Dr. Google helped you?
Yeah, I diagnosed myself. Found an astounding psychiatrist here in Austin. Had, 5-star review after 5-star review.
You looked up psychiatrists, and you almost went to somebody else, but you decided not to settle until you could go to a psychiatrist that you knew would be open to alternative treatment plus medication plus just be a good fit for you.
Yeah, and I actually, he was the first one I called. I didn't hear back from him, from his receptionist for a couple of weeks.
Which is really hard when you're
really
ready
hard
for help.
Yeah, but I ended up seeing him the first day, and it was a game changer. He has kind of the same mindset that I do about things, taking a conservative approach. Let's get some blood tests, make sure everything's good first. We went through history and different things going on, and he was, without a doubt, is bipolar 2 disorder. He hasn't formally diagnosed me because in certain circles of psychiatry, there tends to be reluctance to diagnose someone because it follows them the rest of their life, and that causes issues with insurance and this and that. So yeah, he hasn't formally diagnosed.
He says it with you, but he doesn't put it down on anything official.
Yeah, there's no ICD-10 diagnosis to follow me around the rest of my life. Yeah,
he's so wonderful. I want to say real quick that when you're the partner or the spouse of somebody who's dealing with mental health, there's struggles or mental health disorders or, whatnot, it is also a very frustrating, scary, and lonely journey at times because, this last year, it has definitely affected, of course, my life as well. And this, I'm not making it about me. I'm just talking from the partner and spouse perspective.
It's an important perspective.
But it's not my story to share. I've never felt it's my story to share, even though it's my life as well. It's your story. But I just want to validate that for any spouses or partners listening that are going through something similar, that I know it feels lonely, but you're not alone. And even though you probably feel alone, I don't know if that's helping at all. So hopefully this podcast in general helps. But when you're the partner or the spouse of someone who's dealing with this, just be taken out on you,
Yeah.
And so, like, for example, Brandon would do rapid cycling, when he was in a hypomanic state or, kind of having one of those days. It's like, oh yeah, we'll get all this done. And the next thing I know, we're making all these plans. And I think that I'm going to have his support with business and whatnot. And then he goes in the depressed state and I have no help. I have to take care of everything, the house, the kids, the businesses. And the next thing I know, we're arguing, and the conversation is literally drastically a night and day. And for Brandon and I mean, we have been with each other for 19 years and we are best friends as well as co-parents and lovers and everything else. And I for us, when we're not good or we're arguing, it makes everything else worse. So what happens is that, Brandon would be in one of these places mentally, and when he was rapid cycling, it was out of control. And of course that caused arguments and issues. And we didn't have the information. Like, I didn't have the tools or information on even how to support you, or help. And then you would get even more depressed because then we weren't okay.
Oh yeah.
So it would actually cause bigger problems because when we're not okay, like, the rest of the world feels like it's not going to be okay. When you and I are okay, it's like we can take on the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So the evening that I had said that, let's just say Brandon was not very kind and just, arguing,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon has never, just for the record, done anything abusive towards me at all.
No.
It was just the arguing was nonstop and he was blaming me for everything. Everything was my fault. And I told him, I love you, but I hate you right now. Because I was completely out of control. I couldn't control you. And I love you, but the way you were making me feel and treating me, I just hated it, But it was what made you finally look up psychiatrists and get the help that you need. So those situations really suck.
Yeah.
They really suck. But sometimes it takes just getting that frank and that blunt, to be willing to get the help that's needed.
Well, I'm pretty damn hard-headed, so I tend to get
real blunt.
I tend to need a kick in the ass to get me to realize things sometimes, or many times. So there is that to consider too.
I will say this though, it's really wonderful to have the information we have now.
Yes.
It again is a night and day difference, but in a good way.
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't mean things are always perfect by any means. There's still been a journey since you've been seeing your doctor, and you've been making many changes. Do you want to talk about that? The other changes you've been making?
Yeah, because I know I didn't know this as much, but I'm starting to notice that there are a lot of people that have bipolar disorder that will have symptoms that they don't like, and so they just quit their meds, or they think that they're doing better, and they quit doing the things that has gotten them to that point where they are doing better. And I just made it a vow when I started seeing my psychiatrist and getting help that I wasn't going to be one of those people that doesn't take it seriously. Like I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to argue with my wife anymore and go through these cycles that just crippled me emotionally, and I couldn't do anything. And so we started out taking a mood stabilizer, and I'm taking the smallest therapeutic dose, and that's all I'm needing as far as that goes.
Because it metabolizes so fast in your system because you're so dang healthy physically.
Yeah, I went and got a blood test from my doctor, and everything was more than stellar, and so that was good news to hear that. So because of that, that allows me to not need to take much in the way of medication. He also prescribed me an anti-anxiety medication that he prescribed it mainly because it's a mild sedative, and when you have bipolar disorder, sleep is hard. And
As we sit here doing this podcast in our Team No Sleep shirts. Irony.
Matching Team No Sleep
shirts. Irony.
Yeah. And so he one of his big things was that I needed to sleep. I needed to get the proper rest, which, I agree. And so I would take that before bed most nights. And I've gotten to the point where being a lot healthier with juicing the last month, that has been a huge game changer for my mental health as well.
Wow.
But instead of taking the entire pill, anti-anxiety pill, I break it into quarters and only take a quarter of that, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. If I'm kind of worried about not getting decent sleep. But because we talked about in the last couple weeks podcast about taking a good vitamin B12, that has really changed my sleep as well for the better. So,
and I just want to say that the amount of medication you are on, of course, and the blood tests, and then, how much of the other meds you're taking, that you keep your doctor informed at all times, and you guys are both in communication about it, and even if you ever got to a place where you wanted to even wean off meds, that you would do it under his supervision if you ever got to that point. And I want to say it's no small thing, not only for Brandon to go to a psychiatrist, but to also take any kind of medication, whether it's a small dose or not, because we just don't usually take pharmaceuticals in ourselves or in our family, at all. And so, this was a huge deal, not because of shame, not talking about it or whatever, but also because pharmaceuticals are something that we have, pretty strong beliefs on, about being, people being overdiagnosed and overprescribed to, and how there's just such a lack of information on how all the alternative treatments people can do as well or instead, depending on the situation. So it was very humbling, right, for you.
It was a big step for me to do that. Before I got a medication, I hadn't taken a prescription medication in 18 years. And the only thing I had taken was 3 Benadryl in the course of 18 years, right. Because when I was practicing chiropractic, I had allergies so bad one time that I couldn't even sleep and function. So 25, 30 patients on the books the next morning, I needed to get some sleep. So that was it. But yeah, nothing for 18 years. So it was a big deal for me to start taking medication.
Absolutely. So you've been doing that, and also keeping regular appointments with your psychiatrist, and then juicing, you said, has been helping.
Yeah, big time.
Physical and mental health.
My workouts are everything to me because I get really intense in the gym. I go all out. I leave everything I can in there. And, I got my Slayer or Pantera or the heaviest Metallica, Megadeth I can put on going on, and I just go and kick ass in the gym, and it's everything for my mental health, along with the juicing and the much better sleep. And something I've actually incorporated just a few days ago based on your recommendation is meditation. I know
that sounds hippy dippy, y'all, but this is some straight up amazing shit.
No, there is a lot of research, scientific research.
There you go. It's not hippy dippy.
No, to prove the benefits of meditation. And I have known this for a long time. I have known better. I've just been lazy, not wanting to do it because I have a little bit of an ADHD mind going on. I always have to be doing something. So sitting still for any length of time is, that's agonizing. So the meditation has been great. And what I do is I just, whatever the first word that comes to mind. I focus on that for about 15 minutes is where I'm at with meditation. And I just use that word in every sentence form I can. So the other morning, abundance came into my mind. So I would say things like, I have abundance. My life is full of abundance. I have an abundance of love for my kids, abundance of love for my wife. I have an abundance of love for my kids and for my wife. Just things like that. Just use it in every way I could in my mind, just affirming all this stuff for 15 minutes. And it's almost like I felt my mind kind of going into a little bit of a trance after a while. And then all of a sudden, I just felt alert, ready. My mind was ready to go. And I opened my eyes and had a fantastic day. That was the day you flew to Calgary, and I was really tired because I wanted to wake up with you leaving at the crack of dawn.
But that was so sweet when you came out to the garage and gave me a hug and kiss before I left. I loved
stumbled.
You did.
I was here before you left.
Yeah, it was so sweet. It made my whole day.
Yeah, so, but it helped. I don't know that I would have gotten through the day without the meditation, and it helped me mentally like you wouldn't believe. I feel like meditation is doing for my mind what lifting weights is doing for my muscles. And just in 3 or 4 days, I have been astounded at how much easier I can deal with things and cope with things. And just I don't have that base level of sadness when I'm viewing the world now. Like I feel like I actually have a happy level to view everything with, and
which
positive.
You can't take for granted. You won't take for granted now.
No, and that's been huge for me, because when I'm happy, I am really damn productive. I get a lot of shit done, and
we have a lot of shit to do. So.
We have a whole hell of a lot of shit to do. So
that's really helpful.
I've been blown away by how awesome meditation is. So meditate daily.
Yeah, and there's different ways to do it. You can do guided meditation. If you're pregnant or a new mom, Expectful is a great platform for that. And actually, I have a podcast coming out on episode on their podcast with Anna, and she's the one that shared with me how she meditates, and it just finally clicked and resonated with me. And so I did what she suggested, and I do it for 20 minutes. For me, I'm a huge fan of affirmations and cognitive behavior therapy. So what works for me, which is kind of I shared with Brandon, and what's working for him, but I focus on a few affirmations, and there's apps like Buddhify, and I haven't used it. I tried for a while, and it's nice, but I rather just find 1 or 2 or 3 affirmations or words that I need in that moment and do it. So there's lots of different there's no right way. Again, variations of normal and meditation, right? I'm really into affirmation meditation, I guess I would call it. I don't know if somebody else calls it that too, but that's what I am finding myself doing. So I highly recommend it. It makes you feel rested, more focused. It makes you feel like you got an extra couple hours of sleep too.
It really does.
It really does.
It rejuvenates you.
I like doing it first thing in the morning, and then I like doing it in the afternoon. And first thing in the morning, I sit up so I can stay awake and do it. And then in the afternoon, if I do it in the afternoon, especially during when witching hours begin, I lay down and let myself do it and drift off in and out a little bit if I like, or if my body wants to, because if I fall asleep doing it in the afternoon, it means I need a few minutes of rest. So what is something that you feel that you've learned about yourself over the last few months in getting the help that you need and deserve, and just kind of the journey of that you're currently still on?
Well, 2 things.
Okay.
The first thing is that there is no one thing that's going to cure it. When I first started seeing my psychiatrist and he prescribed me the mood stabilizer I'm on, my first 7 weeks, I was in this euphoric state that I felt like I was cured. And I actually feel like that was, looking back, that was probably a hypomanic state that I was in, because it really did feel like this happy euphoria, like, oh my gosh, this is all in the past.
And nothing
for me.
can get me down.
Nothing will get me down. And I ended up coming back from an appointment with him one day, and just I woke up late. We had a really late night. I think one of the kids woke up or something like that, and I woke up late. I didn't eat. I
Which
didn't
is
do my
so
morning routine.
unlike you.
Yeah, I had to get out the door and get
I
to my
don't
appointment with
remember the last time you've ever not eaten first before doing something. Like that is, it's so out of character for you.
Yeah, it was weird, and so I came home and
then instead of eating when you got home, you jumped on the computer to do some work.
Yeah, I was
And I was cranky with you. I think you rejected me the night before, and I was pissy about it.
which I didn't reject you.
So it was like all these
I could
weird.
see where it looked like.
It was like all these weird things kind of came together, and you didn't practice any self care that day, to be honest.
No, and because I hadn't eaten, I was like incredibly hangry.
And it just it just all of a sudden just
so
spiraled down.
I had 7 weeks of hypomania, and then that day I went into 3 to 3.5 weeks of deep dark depression, and
I think it was even worse because you were like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to happen anymore, and then it did.
Yeah, I felt like this deep sense of hopelessness and that things would never be better, and it was pretty rough, but that
led us to now where
yeah.
It's like medication is one of like 5 things or 6 things or whatever that are in your toolbox that you're needing to do on a regular basis.
Right, and that's something else. Like I said, there's no one cure-all. If you have bipolar disorder and you go to a psychiatrist and you prescribe medication, that will not cure you. It will help. It's one of a few different things. I was in an appointment with my psychiatrist and said, well, I know now that medication is only, half of it. And he said, well, it's more like, a quarter of it.
Mm-hmm. I love him.
And I actually feel like it's even smaller than that. I feel like, it's maybe a fifth to a sixth of everything. Mm-hmm. And there's just a number of different things you just have to do to get to a level you want to be at.
And it takes work. I mean, it's work.
It is a lot of work. So that's the first thing I learned.
Okay.
The second thing I learned is that, well, you pointed out to me because, you did for me what you do for thousands of women over the years at your events, and point out that I have been hard on myself, like brutally, intensely hard on myself in my mind since I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an example, I had one morning early last week, where I woke up early because I wanted to go to the gym. I like to go to the gym in the morning. But I slept like crap that night. So I got up early, I went to the gym. I had a really hard workout. It was kind of hard because I was tired, but it was a really productive, great workout. But after it was over, I was thinking, oh, I should have done one more rep here. Like, I could have done 5 more pounds here. I should have done this weight here. And I was just picking apart everything. And then it went to, well, I didn't sleep very well last night. I should have sacrificed my workout to get more sleep because, my body really needs sleep. But then I knew that if I slept in, I would have kicked my own ass in my mind with, oh, you lazy idiot. Why didn't you get up and work out? You're just being a bum. Don't be a loser. Get up and take charge. You're the one that's run the show, not your body or your mind, sort of thing. And
you cannot win.
This is how it is with literally everything in my life. I walk down the hall and I, see a sock that's on the floor, and I think to myself, oh, I'm just tired. I don't feel like bending over to pick that up. One more thing to pick up that these kids leave around. But on the other side, I'm thinking, wow, you lazy bum. Just pick up the damn sock and throw it in the laundry room. So it's just, that's one example. And, I should probably pick up the sock, and that's the more responsible thing.
No, it's just a sock that you've now tore yourself down over.
Yeah, but it's just little things like that throughout the day.
You're so hard on yourself all day long.
One of the big things that the meditation has helped me with is, because I think of the first word that comes to mind, I use all these affirmations on myself during the meditation, and I have felt a lot better about myself in the last few days. And I can honestly say I haven't been very hard on myself at all, actually.
Right. I came to the realization recently that my self-love journey was very based around body positivity. not, we kind of have opposite struggles. And I realized last week that we we completely missed the fact that you needed to be on a self-love journey just for how you feel about yourself and your expectations of yourself. And, feeling like if you're meeting those expectations or failing them, which most of the time you feel like you're failing them because your expectations are literally unreachable because you can't win no matter what you do. And so we realize, and it's opened my mind up more about when we talk about like self-love and body positivity are two different things when it comes to this. Like, learning to love yourself in the skin you're in is also learning to love yourself in the brain you're in, and just the life you're living in and everyday life. And so for you, and then we started doing the meditation a few days later, which is such a great help with this because you're rewiring your brain and your thought process and how you're talking to yourself. So, which is what I did with my self-love journey, but not with meditation. And so it's been interesting to realize that self-love doesn't automatically mean body positive. It means just really learning to give yourself grace and loving yourself for who you are. And for you, that means something entirely different. So you're now finding yourself also on a self-love journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like body positivity is something I've never struggled with. I've never felt. Yeah, I've never felt. I remember
like we were 19 and you just be naked walking around. I'm like, that you're okay. You're totally comfortable with that. You're like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? It's my body.
Why aren't your clothes off?
Right. Exactly.
Like, come on here.
Exactly. Because I had body positivity issues. There weren't any awesome people on Instagram showing themselves off in underwear and bras. I mean, I don't know who would do that. That's kind of ridiculous.
It's a little alarming.
It's so alarming.
It's a little concerning.
Oh my goodness. So
hashtag it's traumatizing.
Oh, the amount of inside jokes on this episode is so good.
Yeah.
So those are the two big things that you realize about yourself.
Absolutely.
And what is something that you would tell a partner or a spouse of somebody with bipolar 1, bipolar 2, or something similar?
Wow, that's a tough one. I don't know. Just tell them you love them, and that's a tough one because when you're going through your cycles, when you have bipolar disorder, you don't always realize what's happening. And that's why it's a mental disorder. It's your brain is doing things that you can't always control. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, for someone like me who's kind of a control freak, that's a very difficult thing to come to terms with. Like, I've read so many self-help and personal development and success books that and it kind of establish these principles in my mind to feel like if I can't control my mind, then I'm failing. I'm a loser. And that's that whole self-love, missing from my mindset. But that's a really tough one for me to answer because
do you want me to?
I think maybe you should try and answer that because
I would say what I have learned this year, especially the last few months, since we've had more information and help, is that the first thing is you don't have control. Like, I don't have control over what's going on in your brain or how you're feeling or how you're taking things or what you choose to do or how you choose to react. It's not in my control. The second thing is don't make it personal if you can. So the more I don't take it personal, the more I can just be here to hold space for you and help you with whatever part you're going through. So I stopped before we knew that, you're bipolar, you have bipolar 2 disorder. Every time we argued or you were cycling, I took it personal, and then we would fight, and then it just makes everything so much worse.
Yeah.
Especially for being bipolar, it makes everything worse. Yeah. So now that I know what's going on, times you've been like that over the last few months, I just don't take it personal. Doesn't mean it's easy, but I don't take it personal, and I don't hold grudges because of that, and I don't make it about me because it's not about me at all. It's about you and what you're going through. Just like my anxiety isn't about you, it's about me and what I'm going through.
Right.
And so I would say those are the two biggest things I can do. And when you're having like a really hard moment or day, I don't know. I think I've come to love the pure part of you more through this. Like I see that child that didn't get the love and attachment and the help and support that you deserved. And that breaks my heart a little bit. And reaffirms why we work so hard to raise our kids the way we do. So as the spouse to or partner to someone who is going through this, just love them. Know you're not in control. Put your arm around them and just try to hold space for them if you can. This is mental health things I think can feel very scary, especially if you're the spouse or partner and you don't understand it. But the more you educate yourself and the more help that you get, it can become less scary and you just find a new normal. It's another variation of normal.
Absolutely.
And so we're still in that process right now,
Yeah.
and it's getting better and better. And like you said, and we both have said it's an ongoing journey. Like we're finding a new normal for the rest of our lives. It's not something that's just going to be cured and we go back to however it was. But it doesn't mean that our new normal can't be wonderful and full of a lot of happiness as well. And that's okay. It's okay for it to be different now, I think. Don't you?
Well, yeah, and anything worth having in life is a lot of work.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've always worked really hard at my physical health, but not so much with my mental health
Right.
at all. And I'd never really realized that I needed to. But when you think about every kind of spiritual discipline or practice, you always have the mind, the body, and the soul. And that doesn't sound right if you say body, mind, and soul. It's the mind coming first. So.
Right. And the thing is that with the body, there's an outward appearance. But with the mental health, there's not. You don't get to see how worked out and rested and beautiful the brain is, or whatever. And so that does make it more challenging in those ways.
Well,
but it's not important.
The mind is so complex that it's it's mind-boggling to think about what we don't know.
If you lose body fat, gain muscle, whatever you gain strength in the gym, that's measurable. But with mental health, it's harder to measure it. So you have to look at the way it's measurable, like how are my relationships in my life and how are my finances and how am I feeling today? And you have to find different measurements, I guess, to look at your mental health. So is there anything else that you wanted to say or share this first time in talking about this on our podcast?
Well, yeah, if you are going through this struggle, I mean, if you're going through some really steep highs and some really deep lows, often, then think about maybe seeking out some help. If you're having a lot of feelings that you're losing control over your life, and you don't know how to stop it. You might need some help. Just if at the very least, maybe some therapy or some counseling. It doesn't hurt.
Okay.
We go to the doctor when we have this condition or that condition, or people go to a chiropractor if they're in pain, or a physical therapist if they need rehab, things like that. But when it comes to our mind, that's really neglected, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody. My profession is about focusing on the body, not the mind. So
right.
I get it. I understand that neglect.
And fight to be heard. And I think there's similarities and crossovers with depression and anxiety, and then of course bipolar and other things I know I'm not thinking of that maybe you're dealing with, those of you who are listening. And so make sure that you're getting the proper help or diagnosis or treatments for whatever it is that you're going through. And it's hard to be your own advocate when you're feeling that way. But when you're ready to get the help, you make sure you get that help that's right for you. I think that's really important. So Yeah, this was really great. It's almost refreshing to talk about it, I think.
Yeah, I've
In a way.
wanted to do, I've told you I've wanted
I
to do this
know
podcast
you
for a
have.
while. And
I've been Mama Bear, Mama, well, let's see. Wifey Bear. doesn't have the same doesn't have the same yeah, no, it doesn't work. But anyways,
you might be a redneck if your wife is your mama.
oh my god. I want to wake up the kids. I, oh, what's up, cousin? So, no, but I just really wanted to protect your space. I just want to protect your space. I wanted to I just love you so much. And I just want to end with sharing again that the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, it's suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And they have chat or call, and it's anonymous. And again, the phone number is 1-800-273-8255. And in those moments where you just feel like you're all alone and no one cares, that's what this is for.
Yeah.
And there's other crisis lines too, especially like for new moms and depending what area you live in. But even if you're a new mom listening to this and you just feel like you can't do this and you can't handle it, or you, whatever, just any thought that you're scared of, even if it's not suicide, you can call them and ask them for maybe like a crisis hotline number.
Yeah.
You just call. It's anonymous, and the thing is when you call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, I'm going to read this real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
First, you'll hear an automated message featuring additional options while your call is routed to your local Lifeline Network Crisis Center. We'll play you a little music while we connect you to a skilled trained crisis worker. A trained crisis worker at your local center will answer the phone. This person will listen to you. Isn't that just wonderful, by the way?
Yeah,
Listen to you, understand how your problem is affecting you, provide support, and get you the help you need. Lifeline Center calls are free and confidential and 24/7 availability. So get on your phone, get on your computer, get on the chat, or call 1-800-273-8255 and just be heard and be validated and be supported because you deserve that.
Yeah. And one thing that when I did call, they suggested is that if you are in a crisis, you can go to your local ER to be admitted. My dad was actually a behavioral intake therapist at a hospital for many years. That was his job. People would come to him to be admitted for alcoholism or mental disorders or whatever else, and he would assess to determine whether they would actually be admitted or not. So you can do that. They will also see if they can have people come to your house and kind of talk with you and see if maybe you need to be admitted in that way. So
there's
they can actually
so many different options.
Yeah, they do offer a list of options. So
and it's just best, just like I tell new moms, don't wait until you break down and break apart to get the help that you deserve.
Yeah. I mean,
so same with this. They also have something on the website called Safe Space. Visit our Safe Space for a calming, distressing environment. So there's lots of resources here. It's free. This is what they do, you guys. This is why they're there. So if you need that support or help, I can confirm as the wife of a spouse who is called that it saves lives. So
it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, you guys, none of these questions were I questioned Brandon and asked him to share some things. We didn't discuss this beforehand. I didn't even have them written out. So hopefully you feel the authenticity and transparency and love and support and solidarity through this podcast. Even if you're, not completely familiar with it, it's good to know. So if someone you love is going through it, or you're just having postpartum blues even, hopefully you got some support from today. And the more we talk about this, the more it's going to become, I want it to be as normal as talking about which exercise or powerlifting plan we're on for our health of our body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One last thing to add is be careful of social media and the effect it can have on your mental health. There is a lot of bad news out there, and the majority of it is gonna
depress you
and cause you some fear, because
Anxiety.
that's what it's intended to do. And to get the masses riled up, and it can definitely do that. I got completely off of Facebook. I go on Twitter maybe once a month, but I am on Instagram a lot. But I like Instagram. But I try and keep what I look at
We're very picky about
far
who we
away
follow.
from the news, and we all know what's going on in the news, and we don't need to constantly reaffirm it in our minds. So
I talk about this, about being mindful how we use our social media and who we follow to help with like anxiety and just our daily lives. So same thing goes for any kind of mental health, I think.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So just follow us and all our million accounts and you'll be good.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And if anyone has any questions, you can always DM me on Instagram. If I can answer it, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you to go seek help from your local qualified health professional, because I can only technically give advice on chiropractic and neuromusculoskeletal conditions. So I can give you all the advice about those, but mental health, I might have to refer you out to someone else. So
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for listening, you guys, and we love you.
Adios.